Good evening. Good evening, all kinfolk. Good evening, all IABT. My name is Jeremy Gordon. This is the second episode of the Training Corner. I've just got back from doing the Lifetime Fitness Indoor Triathlon. I did that earlier today with Keisha's help and support, and we'll have a breakdown and we'll have an explanation of how that went in the next episode. What I wanted to do tonight is I wanted to give you some information about how I'm going to pick my racing schedule. I've got a lot of races that I want to do this year, and I've got to figure out which ones to do and in what order. The first thing that I'm going to do as I figure out which races to do is figure out which race is the most important race. I'm going to pick one race that is the most important to me, and that's going to be my A-level race. It's going to be my North Star. It's going to be the race that I use to plan out the rest of my season. In this situation, the race that I'm going to pick is the Redmond 70.3, which is in September in Oklahoma. When I pick that race, now that I know that that's the race that I'm going to use, then I can take my whole schedule and I can place it around that race. I can plan out my training blocks, like when am I going to focus on getting faster on the run, when am I going to focus getting faster on the swim, all those sorts of training blocks I can come up with now that I've picked that race. Now that I know that I'm going to do the Redmond 70.3, I'll be able to taper appropriately, get the workouts down, get the risk of injury down before the race. That way I'm able to do the race completely healthy. Once you figure out what your most important race is going to be, you can also set up a couple of tune-up races before. For instance, for me, I'm going to use Redmond 70.3 as my A-level race, my most important race. So then I'm going to set some races in August and some races in July as tune-up races. That way I can do practice and simulation under race-like circumstances. I'll be able to practice my transitions under race-like circumstances, and I'll be able to get ready for the Redmond 70.3 better by doing these tune-up races. The second thing that I do when I'm planning a race schedule is I do research with regard to the races that I want to do. Some of the research that I include are things like, is my race going to be sold out? Is this a race that I'll actually be able to sign up for? Especially when you get to the Ironman distance and even the half Ironman distance, a lot of the races sell out a long time before the race. Even some sell out maybe the day after the race the year before. Like you do a race on a Sunday, maybe by Monday or Tuesday of that following week, the race sells out for the next week. So these are things that you need to know if you're trying to sign up for that race. Maybe you can go to some discussion boards. Maybe you can ask on the IABT community page or the Facebook discussion group. Maybe you can find out if you need to be a volunteer for the race on 1 year. That way you have a better chance of signing up for the race the next year. Those are all research things that you can do before the race and before you sign up. The second thing that you want to find out and what you want to use as you're coming up with your training schedule and your race schedule is the race, does it have a certain goal that you're trying to make? Actually, I don't want to do that. The second thing that you want to look at is, what is the cost of the race? I know for a lot of us, we're not made out of money, so we have to pick our races carefully. We want to sign up for races when they're first available. It's best maybe to sign up for a race as soon as it becomes available, or maybe at the beginning of the year, because the closer that you get to race day, the higher that the cost will be. Also, you want to look into things like travel plans. Is this a race that's in another city or another state? Do you have to take a plane? Do you have to take a train? Or other method of transportation, hot air balloon, I don't know. And also, how are you going to get your bike there? because you're going to have to work on bike transportation as well if your race is far off and you're going to fly there. So these are all things that you need to take a look at. How are you going to get your equipment there? How are you going to get your bike there? How are you going to get there? What's the cost of flying there? All those different things. The third thing that you want to look at is other research with regards to the race. Is the course going to be hilly? If you do the race in March or April, is the course going to be cold? If you do the race in June or July or August, is the race going to be hot? Are you going to deal with hills? Are you going to have rough terrain? Are you going to have decent terrain? Some races, the terrain is bad. Some races, the terrain is pristine. So these are all things that you want to look at as you're setting a race calendar. The final thing that I look at when I'm trying to set a race calendar is the existence of other types of races, specifically half marathons, marathons if you're so inclined, bike rallies like the MS 150 or a 50 or 60 mile bike ride, for if you're so inclined, a 100-mile bike ride of sorts, 5Ks, 10Ks, if you want to do those sorts of things, and other races like that. If you're looking to do those races are fine. And I actually put a couple of half marathons in my schedule in order to keep my fitness up, in order to make sure that I'm continuing to do long runs on the weekends. For instance, I'm considering doing the New Orleans Olympic Triathlon at the end of March. I'm also considering doing the Galveston Half Ironman at the end of April. But at the end of February, I'll also be doing the Cowtown Half Marathon. And that Cowtown Half Marathon is so that I can get practice running 13.1 miles. So I can get experience and practice running that distance and being ready for it. And it also helps keep me honest with regards to my training so that I can keep on doing those long runs on the weekends. So if you're interested in doing some triathlons, it helps to have some of those other races on your schedule as well so that you can keep yourself honest when you're coming up with your races and all of your training. So for me, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Now that I've picked what my North Star, my big time race is going to be, that being the Redmond 70.3 in September, then let's look at some other sorts of things. In August, I'm going to do one triathlon that is open water, that is in Texas in August. It's not going to be wetsuit legal. That's not going to be allowed. And in Texas, I'll be able to do a race also in July. That's not wetsuit legal. It's going to be hot, as I would imagine it will get later on in the day when I'm doing Redmond. And I can also train on not having wetsuit legal in hot weather, in hot conditions, working on my moisture, working on my hydration, working on salt packets or the little tablets that you can keep from cramping and all those different sorts of things. I'll be able to practice with those as I'm getting ready for that Redmond race. I'll be able to use a race in August, a race in July, and even the Disco Triathlon in June as races in order to get me ready for the hot weather that I'm going to be experiencing in Redmond for September. And I'll also be looking at doing the Galveston 70.3. That's at the end of April. So then an example of a tune-up race would be the New Orleans Triathlon, which is both a sprint distance and a Olympic distance. And that is at the end of March. That race would be more of a training race. Maybe I wouldn't run it up to race pace, but I would be able to run it at a comfortable pace, do the cycle at a comfortable pace, and use it as a good tune-up for the Galveston Half Ironman. So those are some examples of what my training calendar is going to look like. Like I said before, we're looking at maybe the Cowtown Half Marathon in at the end of February. Then we're looking at the New Orleans Triathlon at the end of March. Then we're looking at the Galveston Half Iron at the end of April. Then we're looking at the Captex as either a sprint or an Olympic at the end of May. Then we're looking at a couple of sprints in June and a couple of sprints, a sprint in June, a sprint in July, and a sprint in August. All of those as tune-ups to get ready for the Redmond Triathlon in September. And then obviously we have the get-together in Chicago, and that's going to be in September as well. So I need to make some money in order to deal with all of these races. All right, so while I work on that, that's all for today. If you got any questions, if you got any comments, leave them in the comments below. My name is Jeremy Gordon, and this is the Training Corner. Thanks.